So in the last episode, you saw me take the fuel pump off of the truck and I get it back here and I'm working at it at my desk and I can't get the fuel pump apart. So I struggle with it for several days and eventually it breaks apart. It turns out that the gasket was it was sealed really well. Eventually I got it apart, and so now we can continue with the rest of the rebuild. So after working on this fuel pump for a little while and not really getting anywhere, I decided to search online and see if I could find some information. I found an old Army manual TM9-1828A. It's a manual on fuel pumps, and the copy that I found online was from December 1952. And the problem with this manual was that it showed you every single possible type of fuel pump, apparently, that was in service in the Army. And eventually that covered. There were a lot of different types of fuel pumps, and there was really a good way to identify which one I had, except scrolling through the pages and looking for one that seemed to match. The closest to fuel pump that I could find, and even this wasn't an exact match, but the closest I could find was the fuel pump series BF or BM. And so I found the section and it had instructions to disassemble and reassemble the fuel pump. This was kind of helpful because it did tell me that I was going in the right direction. However, it did lead me down the wrong path a few times. For the first instance, it told me to leave the small center screws in as I'm trying to take off that, what it calls the top cover, even though the fuel pump is put in, so that's at the bottom. But anyway, you're supposed to leave those screws in, but you're supposed to take off that cover. Well, once I finally decided that I wasn't getting anywhere doing it the way the manual told me, I decided to remove those screws, and sure enough, the cover popped right off, and I realized those screws were holding the cover in place. So I spent a lot of time prying on that cover. I'm really glad that I didn't bend it or break it, because I didn't have a replacement for it, but the manual lied to me, and it almost caused me to break the thing I was trying to fix. File riveted end of rocker arm rocker arm pin flush with washer. Drive out rocker arm pin with punch and hammer. So that is the pivot point for this thing right here. So it looks like this side, the pin has been riveted in place, so we need to grind that down. So this fuel pump rebuild has turned into an unboxing video because I had to buy some new tools. I didn't have these tools down here, so I needed to buy replacements. So I ran down to Home Depot. And bought some new tools. So first we have this chisel and punch kit. These chisels are very helpful if I ever have a broken stuck bolt that I absolutely cannot get off. I can use the chisel to pop the head off the bolt, and then I can drill out the bolt and rethread the hole. And then we have these punches here as well, which are going to be useful for this fuel pump. I bought the box set with the chisels because it was actually slightly cheaper than buying just a punch. Same with this file set. This file set here, it was a much better deal to buy the full set, and I'll have all the different files and rasps for any project that comes up. I needed the file to file down this piece right here, this rod, and there's a replacement for this rod in here. Is sort of like a rivet. It goes through the hole, and then on this side you pound the end of the rod so that it bends over and keeps it in place. So instead of being a nut and bolt, it is just a rod that you push through and then you rivet it in place. The instructions are to file this down and then use the punch to push on the end and push the rod out of the fuel pump. So that's why I needed to buy files and punches. So now I'm just going to file this down, and this is probably going to take a minute. So yeah, now we use the punch. Okay, I threw it in the vise to hold it in place. So I'm just pressing right there. And that's what's left of the washer that was holding that pin in place. And I'm gonna tap on the end and push that pin through, or at least push it out far enough to where I can grab it from the other side and pull it the rest of the way out. And I am just going to give this pin a little tap. So I went down to Home Depot, I got 3 different grits of sandpaper. So with sandpaper, the higher the number, the finer the sandpaper. So 100 is like a medium. It's really good for taking off any excess gasket material that's left on stuck to a surface. And then 220 is a little bit finer. It's really good for just removing any surface corrosion and getting a nice smooth surface. And then you can finish it off with 800 grit for a very nice surface that the gasket can adhere to. So I'm going to open up the 220 first, and I'm going to start with this side right here. If you look at in the light just right, you can see there are some imperfections, and each of those is a place where theoretically it could leak. So we're just going to go around and we're going to use the sandpaper to remove any corrosion, remove any marks from where we were trying to pry the pump apart, and we're going to get a nice smooth surface that the gasket can adhere to. So now I'm going to take the 800 grit and just go over it to just finish it off really nice. I'm not trying to polish it too much or trying to get all the scratches, all the imperfections out. I'm just making it just a little bit smoother so that I don't run into any problems later. It is important that you want a nice even spread. You don't want to focus on one area and neglect another, because then that'll create an area where it's higher than the other, and that can also cause problems with the seal. So after a ton of sanding, it was time to clean the parts up to get any metal fragments, any grease or dirt or anything off of them. And actually I did clean them before sanding them and then cleaned them again afterwards, just to cover my bases. And normally I would be scrubbing each of those pieces down, but I decided to use a nifty little tool called an ultrasonic cleaner. Actually, a couple of them, one big one, one small one. These ultrasonic cleaner use ultrasound waves to vibrate the water molecules at a very high frequency, and that actually helps to really scrub things down without having to put work into it. So the water molecules, as they're vibrating, they're really good at getting into the tight spaces, and it is an amazing tool. These were originally very expensive, and they were only used in certain manufacturing processes and things like labs, where you really needed to get things very clean. However, they are now much more affordable, to the point where you could afford one for yourself. I highly recommend the ultrasonic cleaner if you have space for it and if you have a need for it. They are really great for cleaning jewelry, firearms, car parts, any tools. They are very great. You use any kind of like powdered soap with them to provide just a little bit more of the cleaning action. But even just the water itself can really clean off a lot of dirt and grime and stuff from parts.